Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. It's May 8th, and on this day in 1970, it was Willis Reed making his dramatic entrance prior to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. The New York Knicks and Los Angeles Lakers were tied at 3 games apiece with a decisive game in New York at Madison Square Garden. Reed was the league MVP in 1970, averaging 22 points and 14 rebounds a game during the regular season. At 6 feet 10 inches tall, he was the man in the middle, and in this championship series, the man responsible for handling 7'2" Wilt Chamberlain. But Willis had torn his thigh muscle in Game 5 and had missed Game 6 because of it. With Reed not in the lineup, Wilt poured in 45 points and grabbed 27 rebounds in a 22-point blowout win for the Lakers. And with Reed expected to be out in Game 7, well, a similar outcome was predicted on this night. As both teams were warming up a few minutes prior to the game, Willis Reed walked out of the tunnel and onto the floor, in uniform and ready to play. The crowd at the Garden erupted in a crescendo of cheers. Knicks' spirits were lifted. The Lakers, on the other end of the court, all stopped shooting and turned to see Reed walking towards the Knicks basket to get ready for the game. In the locker room prior to this moment, Reed made the decision to, in essence, play on one leg against the greatest scorer in the NBA at the time, because he didn't want to have to look at himself in the mirror 20 years later and say he wished he had tried to play. So he received a series of painkiller injections, and he walked out to this thunderous welcome. And what got the crowd and his teammates going even more were the 2 baskets he knocked down in the first 2 Knick possessions. Those would be the only points he would score in the game, but the boost those 4 points provided was astronomical. And while this will always be called the Willis Reed game, what gets overshadowed a lot is the game that Walt Frazier had that night. Frazier had 36 points, and he dished out 17 assists. He was a perfect 12 for 12 from the free throw line. Dick Barnett had 21, and Dave DeBusschere had 18 points, 17 rebounds. Reed played 27 minutes that night, mostly in the first half, and he was mobile enough to cause Wilt some problems. Chamberlain scored 21, pulled down 24 boards, but it wasn't nearly enough. The Knicks built an early double-digit lead and held it all the way to the end of the game, winning 113-99. It was the Knicks' first NBA championship in their 24-year history. Also on this day in 1968, Catfish Hunter threw a perfect game for the Oakland Athletics against the Minnesota Twins. Hunter was a 22-year-old who was coming off a 13-17 season the previous year. On this day, though, he faced 27 Twins and sat them all down. He struck out 11, but he did live in the danger zone for most of the game. He went to full counts on 6 hitters, and in the second, ran the count to 3-0 on Tony Oliva before coming back with 3 straight strikes. The Twins' bats were anemic on this day. Only 5 balls were hit hard enough to make it out of the infield, and those were all corralled by the A's outfielders. It was the first perfect game in the majors since Sandy Koufax threw one in 1965, and the first by an American League pitcher since Don Larsen's perfect game in the 1956 World Series. In 2016, it was a statistical oddity when Washington Nationals slugger Bryce Harper tied a major league record for walking 6 times in a game. He was also hit by a pitch, which also doesn't count as an official at-bat, so he may have stepped to the plate 7 times against the Chicago Cubs on this day, but he officially had 0 at-bats. According to ESPN stats, it was the first time in at least the previous century that a player had reached base 7 times without recording a plate appearance. But the Cubs' skittishness to pitch to Harper actually paid off. Chicago won 4-3 in 13 innings. In the 4-game series with the Nationals that this game was a part of, the Cubs walked Harper a total of 13 times, also a record for walks by one player in a single series. In 2001, another baseball statistical oddity. I've talked about Roger Clemens and Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout performances in the previous weeks. Well, on this day, pitcher Randy Johnson struck out 20 in 9 innings, but it is not recognized along with the others by Major League Baseball. Johnson was pitching for the Arizona Diamondbacks against the Cincinnati Reds on this day. Through 9 innings, Johnson had mowed down 20 Reds hitters, but the score was tied at 3 at the end of 9, and the game went to extras. Johnson was pulled for a reliever before the start of the 10th inning, but because the game officially went to extra innings, Johnson's achievement is grouped with most strikeouts thrown in an extra inning game, despite the fact he only pitched 9. And I'm guessing that you probably know the horse War Admiral from the Seabiscuit movie about their famous match race in November 1938. Well, on this day in 1937, War Admiral won the Kentucky Derby by 2 lengths over the closest contender. War Admiral was early in his racing career, but this was his 3rd win in 3 races. His reputation would obviously get bigger over the next year, winning the Triple Crown in 1937 and then 8 more races in 1938 before his meeting with Seabiscuit at Pimlico. And time now for today's Non-Sports Did You Know? More than half of the world's lakes are located in Canada. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.